Hey boys and girls, welcome to your video on the factor ninja versus the multiple monster. The first thing that we're going to do is define what a factor is. So two factors are multiplied together to get a product. Whoops, that was supposed to highlight. So in our example here, the product is 32. A factor would be when two numbers are multiplied together to get that product. So the factors of 32 are 1 and 32, 2 and 16, 4 and 8. Because when I multiply 1 times 32, it gives me 32. When I do 2 times 16, it gives me 32. And when I do 4 times 8, that also gives me 32. So factors are the numbers that when multiplied equal the product. The next thing we're going to look at are multiples. The multiples, or the product of a given number and another factor multiplied together. So a multiple is if I do 4 times 9 and get 36. The multiples of 4 would be the product. So 4, 8, 12, 16, so on and so forth. These are all of our multiples, because when I do 4 times another number, it gives me the product. It's kind of also like skip counting. So if I skip count by 4s, I do 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, so on and so forth. So these are our multiples. The next thing we're going to talk about is a GCF, which stands for greatest common factor. So the definition of a GCF is the highest number that divides exactly 2 or more numbers. So going back to what we know about factors. So what are the factors of 4 and 12? Well, I know that 4 times 1 gives me 4. And I also know that 2 times 2 also give me 4. So the factors of 4 is 4, 1, 2, and 2. Now I'm also going to list the factors of 12. So 12 times 1 gives me 12. I know that 2 times 6 gives me 12. And 4 times 3 also gives me 12. So I want to see what the greatest common factor between these two numbers would be. So looking at both the factors, they both contain 4, which would be the GCF, or greatest common factor. Let's look at another example of 7 and 15. So the factors of 7 would be 7 times 1. And 7 is what we call a prime number, meaning there's no other factors other than 7 and itself. 15, the factors of 15 would be 15 times 1. I also know that 3 times 5 is also 15. Now looking at both factors, I don't see any other factor greater than 1. So in this case, our greatest common factor would just be 1. Now let's talk about an LCM. LCM stands for least common multiple. So the definition of a least common multiple is the smallest number that is a multiple of 2 or more numbers. Again, our key word here would be multiple. So let's look at some examples. What we're going to do is list the multiples of 3 and 4. So 3, I'm counting by threes, 6, 9, 12, and 15. Now I could keep going, but I'm going to do at least 5 multiples. Now let's do our 4s. 4, 8, 12. I'll get better at this penmanship as we go through the year, I promise. 16 and 20. Now I want to see what a common multiple is of 3 and 4, and that's the least number. So looking at my multiples, I can see that both multiples have 12. That's a highlight. So the least common multiple between 3 and 4 would be 12. Now I'm going to show you as a strategy how to use your multiples chart. So in our column here for each term, these are the multiples of each number. So you can highlight these as your multiples. Now the factors of each number would be the results, and I'll explain those in a minute. So let's first look at an LCM of 4 and 6. So I'm going to list the multiples of 4. So here's my 4s, and here's my multiples. So I have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and 24. Now I'm going to look at my multiples of 6. So I have 6, 12, 18, 24. So you can see here that the least common multiple between 4 and 6 in this case is 12. Now let's look at GCF. I'll show you how to use this chart to find your GCF. So let's look at our 8 tables here. I want to find what all the common factors are of 8. So I can see that 8 and 1 would be a factor. Now I'm going to use my chart and see where else I get a product of 8. So looking at here, I see 8 and 1. Looking at here, that means other factors would be 2 and 4. Now I'm going to find my factors of 14. So I'm going to look at all of my multiples and see where I can find 14. So I see 2 and 7. And I'm going to see where else I see 14. I don't see 14 here. 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 Up, I see 14 here. So I already wrote 7 and 2 down. So the only other factors of 14 would be 1 and 14. So in this case, our greatest common factor between 8 and 14 would be 2. So I see a 2 here. Oops. And I see a 2 here. So that's how you can use this chart to help you find the LCM and the GCF. Okay, this concludes your video. I apologize if this went a little longer than I had planned, but you may go back and use this video at any time. You may also use this chart to help as a strategy and as a tool to find LCM and GCF. If you have any questions, we'll talk about them in class tomorrow. All right, have a good night.